how did your mother get the medics to believe how sick you were in order to actually operate?
She had a very convincing personality. So, a lot of times she would kind of sweet talk the doctors, and appear very concerned about my health. And to the point that I don't think that anyone would question her intentions.
What if I told you there's an explanation for every single treatment and procedure Gypsy had? Gypsy Rose was telling the truth. Well, partially. Gypsy Rose is on a press tour right now promoting the last season of her show. She had an interview with UK Daily Mail, and I feel like it was slightly confrontational. And you heard Gypsy's answer. How did the doctors do all this? How did they get away with doing these unnecessary surgeries and procedures? Well, Dee Dee just sweet-talked them. And she was partially telling the truth with that statement. There was one doctor that they were very, very close with, like blurring professional lines here. His name was Dr. Beckerman, but I'll get to him in a little while. When you Google Gypsy Rose and her procedures and Dee Dee in connection to that, it gives you a lot of misinformation. The internet will tell you Gypsy was born perfectly healthy, although she was a little premature. But let me tell you from somebody who has studied this case, looked at the medical records, this simply is not true. Gypsy Rose was born with a chromosome disorder that caused most of her issues. Let's start off with there weren't 30, there were about 9. They diagnosed her with a chromosome disorder when she was born. Gypsy Rose was born premature, she was born underweight, and she had microcephaly and strabismus, misalignment of eyes. She did spend time in the NICU. While she was a newborn, she was diagnosed with failure to thrive, and subsequently a feeding tube was placed. It is clear that Gypsy Rose did have digestive issues as a baby and a toddler, and she may still have had some as an adult. Did it require a feeding tube? Probably not. That was probably left in for the con. She was also diagnosed with infant pulmonary sleep apnea, and that is where it's very scary, where an infant stops breathing while they're sleeping. Gypsy Rose was on a sleep monitor. Her grandfather, whom they lived with at the time, even said in the documentary that the machine would go off. It would beep. Dee Dee would get up and turn off the machine, make sure Gypsy's okay. So although Gypsy was diagnosed with a chromosome disorder, they didn't know which one it was, but she did have the markers for a deletion. They only found out it was a specific one, 1Q21.1, in 2011 when the testing became available. So I mentioned the strabismus, the misalignment of eyes, that is in connection to the microdeletion. Gypsy Rose did have surgery on one eye, but had she not, with the weak eye muscles, she would have eventually gone blind. The one thing that Gypsy always mentions is how her salivary glands were taken out, which leads you to believe all of them, right? We have 3 sets. One set was taken out and she has 2 left. This was done for hypersalivation, which is in connection to the microdeletion, where she overproduces saliva. There was an actual medical test done in a doctor's office. You cannot fake. Now, with the microdeletion, you do have problems with your muscles. You have leg weakness. She still has this. She had the golf cart to drive to the dollar store. We saw her at the concert when she mentioned the long line. So she did have a muscle biopsy. At the time, they weren't sure which microdeletion she had, or if it even was a microdeletion. They suspected it. So they were ruling out muscular dystrophy. The childhood leukemia. She could have had this. It was noted once in dental records. So the exploratory throat surgery, she brought this up in her book that was the final straw. Although she told Dr. Phil what the final straw was a procedure she's had 30 times, and she didn't want to have it again because it wasn't needed. With the chromosome disorder, you also have issues with your palate in your mouth. You have a raised palate, and that is where the high-pitched voice comes from. I haven't found anything that substantiates Gypsy Rose had an upcoming throat surgery. I don't know if that's true or not. Also, there are distinctive facial features, short stature, psychiatric issues. People that have this chromosome disorder are more likely to have schizophrenia. And lastly, hyperschmexuality and behavioral issues are connected to this disorder. The mouth surgery, aka the teeth being removed. This is something Gypsy did as an adult and signed off on. That can be connected to the chromosome disorder, but in her case, it was more likely because utilization of a baby bottle and the diet sugar, lots of soda, lots of sugary princess cereals. So I think I've covered most of the procedures, and there is an explanation for every single one that goes back to her microdeletion. Let's talk about Dr. Beckerman. Dr. Beckerman was GRB's doctor in Louisiana. He moved to Missouri, where they moved. He had a hand in getting them a Habitat for Humanity house. He suggested Gypsy Rose for the Ollie Award. He had a hand in getting them Disney trips and special passes to baseball games. Gypsy Blanchard did get close to him. They would go to his house for the holidays. They would go for dinner. Back in the 90s, a lot of medical records were paper files. There was an electronic system, but it wasn't utilized yet by doctors. It had just come out. So a lot of the records being washed away is partially true. Dee would update Dr. Beckerman and he would take her word for it. He even wrote the wrong age on medical paperwork. So they did have Dr. Beckerman backing them up on a younger age, trumping up symptoms. I can do a whole video on Dr. Beckerman and the dynamic with Dee and Gypsy, and I probably will later. So I wanted to clear some things up, particularly the medical procedures. Was Dee a con woman? Yes. Was she good at it? Yes. But every single thing that she got was for Gypsy. They overutilized the feeding tube. They put Gypsy in a wheelchair when maybe she didn't necessarily need it. Shaved Gypsy's head and did everything to make her look younger than she was. And all of this was connected to financial gain, getting trips, and every single thing came down to benefiting Gypsy. Dee wasn't conning money for herself and getting her hair done and buying new clothes and taking trips for herself. Every single thing was for her daughter. So yeah, Gypsy Rose partially told the truth, but she's still a murderer.